Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true firsthand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. For me, one of the most potent realizations that plant medicines have brought into my awareness is the degree to which everything is connected and happening for us. I remember hearing things back in grade school, such as our genes being the dependent factor on what our experience of life was to be, and feeling so disempowered by this and other outdated information just like it. Today's guest on the show is someone who is well aware of how life is working for us and is an expert in the realms of spiritual teachings, epigenetics, and creating harmony in all aspects of the human being. In addition, he has put these passions and more together in a new 4-week program called Empath X, which is designed to cultivate self-awareness on a grand scale in order to empower each client he works with the tools and resources to live out their lives at their fullest potential. So please help me in welcoming my man, Jeremy Koester, to the show. Jeremy, my man, thank you for being here. How are you?
Man, Ryan, thank you so much. I love that intro. I'm so flattered. I'm doing well, bro. It's always so great to connect with someone that has a like heart and resonant mind.
Yes, likewise, man. And, we were chatting before the show about how our good friend Clay, our mutual friend Clay, put us in touch. And it's so true that, like attracts like. And that's like, what I was talking about in your intro, like seeing things happen for us. This is one of the things that for me, plant medicines have helped. And then going deeper into self-awareness and all the other tools that we're going to chat about in the show have allowed me to really see. And, when I think about like Clay introducing us, it's like, oh, this makes sense. Of course, right? Of course we've been introduced,
Yeah.
Those things are so funny to me. And, I'm curious for you, when did you start getting curious about these deeper mysteries of life, whether it be plant medicines, whether it be, religion or sacred spirituality practices or any of these things? When did that adventure start for you?
Man, it's so hard to pick a specific date. I've had, looking back on it, I had such a spiritual childhood, just given the generational trauma that was being passed down and the really powerful, intense experiences of that crucible. And there was a specific date, August of 2010, that there was a little feather that dropped on me that started a little snowball effect of just exploration into that deeper nature of these experiences with divine. I call it God. It's fundamentally unknowable, but I love the tool of psychedelics and how powerful that gives us this frequency of these ancestors, and in a proper setting with good integration support.
Yes.
I feel like it is really a tool to be able to help us shift a lot of the trauma that's being clarified in our space. And so for me, it is that practice of like really taking on things that from one perspective could be a mental health journey, and that the psychedelic medicine being a tool for that exploration. And another aspect, it could be looked at as just self-discipline, right? Of understanding who I am and coming back to who I really know I am, rather than all of these things that I've conditioned myself to be.
Yes.
And you talked about epigenetics. I'm a big fan of Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza. And so a lot of the things that I teach are just real simplified aspects of practice of those scientific discoveries, really, right? That we've known for the longest time, but we're really coming back to this space of integrating this powerful Western mind that is, gosh, I don't know if we're ever going to stop climbing this ladder of attainment and just intelligence, which I love. I really do love it, right? All of the entrepreneurialism, all of the development. Anyway, that's another story.
It's the tree of knowledge, right? Like, it is the tree of knowledge they talk about in the Bible. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that one, because I love pointing out that it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yes.
And so it's that idea of like, okay, so before you had this, obviously it's an allegory, pointing towards, you have life that's been given towards you. And now you have this insight to be able to differentiate good and evil, which really is, I like this and I don't like this, right?
Personal preference.
Right. And then how we scale that through our culture, really. And it becomes this way of meaning making is one of the things that I love talking about. That's to down the road, but to come back to my journey and my specific integration with these the powerful tools out there that really helped me to see in the long run that it's all about nerve tone. And so when we have these entheogenic experiences, it's one of the most powerful things is how it's helps us to embody a tone, while at the same time the medicine dissociates our previous construct of this is who I am and this is how the world works. And so again, when done in a safe container with someone who understands the energetic depths that humanity can go to, and then supports people in their integration practices afterwards, I feel like that context makes it a really wonderful tool for people that need bigger buckets, right? To move things.
And you could even look at it as like what Eckhart Tolle like correlates to the pain body, right? For those that have bigger pain bodies, right? That have that tendency to potentially have really challenging experiences, like making sure they realize like, hey, maybe don't try it for your first time at a music festival around thousands of people and open yourself up to whatever energy is there, right? You know, that's one of the main reasons I started the show, is to give people information on like, because you really like, there's two camps when you look at it. It's like either do it all the time. And there's, you know, especially for cannabis, right? Because this is what I work in is cannabis. And it's so challenging in that industry because, you know, basically the whole entire industry is like, hey, use it all the time. There's nothing you can do. It's not addicting. It's not, I mean, it's completely bullshit. You know, there's so many things there that are not accurate. And it doesn't mean that necessarily you can't interact with it every day or do these things, but to be not aware of it, you're ultimately going to fall victim to the mind trap, you know? And it's just very interesting. And so that's why I started this, to give information out on all these things so that people can actually come to a place where they can hear like, hey, if I'm curious about doing this, what are some potential things I can do to protect myself when I decide to interact with it, right? Because that's one of the biggest challenges is finding that information. You know, that's how people get hurt. It's challenging.
And you know, man, as much as we'd love for it to be these perfect setting, right, with all these integration tools, we're humans and we want to do the thing that we're not supposed to do, right?
Yes.
Tell me what not to do, and that's what we're all going to be doing, right?
Yes.
And you know, it's that same space of, I want to say it's Jeff Brown who said this, but it's a pairing with Ram Dass of this idea that our humanity is going to be our humanity until we die, right? We're going to be dealing with our subconscious, that shadow, that Jungian shadow, till we die. It's the human condition.
Yes.
Right. To me, it's not if it's there, it's a matter of how well we're managing it.
Yeah.
Right. And the things that I teach is that simple practice of what you were talking about with mindfulness. Not what you said, but you kind of alluded towards that space. One of my mentors, Doug Park, says that it really does come back to the space of starting with the mind. And the way I say it is just being able to come into observation. That's the most powerful practice that we can be in, because then it's going to get us to see, oh, I'm limiting myself just based on what I'm observing. And I never, ever say that it's wrong. Right. There's so many people that say like, hey, that's bad. That's evil. It's really
judgment.
That's not helpful. That doesn't integrate. That doesn't align. That doesn't fit. You don't like that. Right. There's nothing wrong or bad.
Yeah.
But just that awareness of saying like, hey, this might not be for me. Right. Or for me, in my case, is like, I'm really doing a number on myself over here. I'm keeping myself from stepping up and in because I'm afraid of that space of being the full light that I know I can be. Yes. Right. And so that space of just coming into observation, that eventually I'm going to have enough. Oh, I've seen this again. I've seen it again. Okay, I got it. Now I'm going to take a little action. And then the next time I can take maybe a little bit more action, that this daily practice of little bits at a time, rather than, oh my God, I got to have this giant cloud full of Odin come to me and Poseidon rise up and Gaia open up a hole from Earth, and these big giant, like really extreme circumstances that that's not where we live our lives, right? We come down from the mountain and we come right back to where we were. Our nervous system snaps right back to where we were when we immerse ourselves in our old environment, right? And so this space of coming into awareness, that's like, so many people are like, oh, that these group of people are really wrong and bad and evil. And that might be your path. You're going to realize that there's wrong, bad, good, and evil, and everything. It's just a matter of what you want to focus on, right? And and the cultivation of it, right? And all of that is an ability.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? I wanted to stop by while I had your ear and share a very special announcement with you. You may have heard people say that we are facing an epidemic of loneliness in the world right now. We believe that this is only half of the story, and that the real epidemic and the root of feeling loneliness is a lack of connection. Do you want to connect to more purpose and passion with the important work you are doing? Do you wish you had closer friendships with people who understand you, listen to you, and are truly present with you? Are you wishing you and your partner could move deeper into love together? The connection in all of these areas comes down to the one most important element of connection: the ability to connect with yourself. If you are ready to see change in your life, if you are ready to feel differently when you wake up in the morning, if you are ready to step into the life you envision for yourself, the first and only route to making these changes is settling in, quieting down, and being able to connect to yourself. Now, this can be a major challenge in today's world with media, culture, and other energies that pull us out of our ability to connect. When you've tried fitness, meditation, and other self-development practices and still find yourself feeling alone and lacking connection, you may be feeling out of options and wondering if you'll ever be able to tap into your full potential that you know deep down is possible in your life. What we have found in working with our clients is that plant medicines, and cannabis in particular, can guide us in having the experience of what true connection looks and feels like. In this way, cannabis can act as a rite of passage for connection and a gateway toward the spouse, tribe, mission, and life you know you are ready for. Now, the pitfall here is that many people become codependent on the medicines, such as cannabis, and expect the medicine to do the work for them. If this continues, what will happen is the user will find themselves reaching for more and more cannabis to feel connection, without taking ownership of their role in the outcome of their experience, and thus they will fall into repeating the same painful patterns. As Zen Buddhism teaches, how you do anything is how you do everything. Therefore, if this painful pattern is showing up in your relationship with cannabis, it is likely a reflection of the same patterns you're experiencing in your friendships, romantic relationships, business, and your relationship with yourself. Learning to work with cannabis effectively will supercharge your experience and will help you get the result you are actually seeking, which is connection. We created a program to support seekers and high achievers like you in doing exactly this: to learn how to work with the healing power of cannabis to connect you back to yourself so you can unlock purpose, passion, and creativity in all areas of your life. What this program will give you is the long-lost user manual for cannabis. This user manual will teach you how to connect with cannabis correctly so that the plant can act as your spiritual aid and ally in life, just as our ancestors understood and practiced. If you're ready to unlock the full power of cannabis, meet like-minded people on the same path as you, build more purpose into your life, and have the most fun doing homework you've ever had, this message is for you. To learn more and qualify for your spot in the program, hop over to our Instagram profile at highly.optimized and book a discovery call. The conscious cannabis revolution is here. Will you be joining us? Sending all of you love Enjoy the rest of the show. It's so amazing you're chatting about this, because one of the things that jumped out at me was, it's the whole concept of judgment versus discernment, right? Judgment is this is bad. Discernment is saying that's not my flavor of ice cream. One of the things I notice is that with the nervous system being so upregulated right now, right, for most people in society, it's challenging to come to that observation place and be content there, because they're so used to being overly stimulated that it seems boring, right? That was my case. I'm curious, like, was that a challenge for you? Did you find, like, at first, like, this stuff was almost understimulating, and then eventually you started to recalibrate, or what was that path like for you?
No, actually, mine was deep, dark hole. I was really, really depressed, just wallowing in generational shame. These emotions they're all frequency based that trigger neurochemicals in our bodies that then trigger the association to your previous experience of that frequency, right? This feeling means I'm anxious. This feeling means I'm hungry. This feeling means I gotta pee, whatever, right? And so all of that, it's all on top of itself for our experiences. So boredom is such a common one, especially for our younger generations, because it's that space of, we've got so many conveniences now, right? And where there's just so many opportunities that we don't recognize that, man, these last 200 years, we've just jumped light years and beyond where we were as a species. So to just put ourselves in that context of things people don't even think about, like one of the things, like this simple list, I think is always the mind blower, is like indoor plumbing, electricity, right? Refrigeration, right? I mean, just these basic things that we don't think about that are like, those are all within the last couple hundred years, right? And Carl Jung came out with this stuff like 100 years ago. Like before that, it was all magic, right? Everything was like completely, and even now it's like just mapping the genome, right? And the funny thing is that we've got, like, it's the most researched science from my understanding of all human history. And we still haven't really uncovered any new major discoveries. We're proving the same basic tenets of what we knew before, right? And so much of it is about this ability that we each have to be able to bring this mind into awareness and service to that flow in my body. And then to differentiate that which is divine from that which is banal, right? The carnal, the passing mundane, right? Like you talk about the boredom. And that to me is that there's not evil. Evil is us, like, projecting out our fears, projecting out the horrors and terrors that we do to us, man.
Yes.
Enough stories about all that. So anyway, that to me opens up this idea of play, right? What we were talking about earlier. Is that, we have all of this. There's plenty of fear, plenty of that up that's real clear. Pick a duality to get lost in, right? It's there. It's not about the dualities. It's about coming back into your own power to realize that we're all human on this planet going through this existential expansion.
And like it is the cosmic giggle to think about it too, right? Because something that I remind myself a lot of frequently when I notice that victim mentality trying to rope itself in, right, is realizing everyone's doing the best with the information they have available. Even the people that you might cast as evil, they don't think they're evil, right? They don't really think like, let's destroy the world, right? They think they're doing the best thing possible with the information they have, And when you start realizing that again, it talks about in the 4 agreements, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, right? Like those things, that's when you really start to understand the level or the ripple effect from actually taking those laws into effect, is realizing like, I am the one that is responsible for my state of being, period, right? If I'm not happy, it's no one else's fault around me except my own. And that's one of the hardest pills right now for people to swallow, especially with PC culture and trigger culture. I mean, that's one of the things I love JP Sears for, is he ruffles those feathers, I think he lives in Austin as well. And
he does.
It's funny, he ruffles those feathers. And I really feel like that's the role of the jester, right? In the archetype deck, in the deck of archetypes, is to ruffle the feathers and make the people who maybe feel as though they're falling victim to life, be able to actually take a step back and go, oh, hopefully maybe they find that funny, and they're like, wow, why do I find that funny? And it gives them a little bit more on that self-awareness journey, you know? And I'm so glad you brought up play, because play for me is the true sign of someone who's evolved. Like if you cannot take yourself seriously enough to actually give yourself time to play every day, right? Which is why I framed that in that way. Like, let's talk about the unconscious belief behind why people don't play, right? Like I'll go because I used to do that for myself, right? Like I used to tell myself, no, I have more important things to do than play, right? And really, first of all, there's a huge thing about distrust in oneself there, right? Something that my heart was calling for, not giving into, and thinking that this was in the driver's seat and knew what to do. But also it's like, you know, what I realized, and I had a cosmic giggle about during a plant medicine experience recently, was how hilarious it was and how serious I was taking myself and life, right? Like it was like, oh, I don't have time to play. Like what I'm doing is that serious. It was just really funny. You know, I'm curious for you, like, when did play become a big thing for you? Has it been something ever since childhood, or was there a break there? And like, how did you reintegrate that back in? And like, what are some aha moments you've found as a result of being able to play more?
That's a great question. I was immersed. My father is such a powerful man. Obviously, he's my father, so for me, he's powerful.
Yeah.
He is in a lineage of just some really awful trauma, right? I mean, my brother and I have processed that there's a lot of things that he did to us that we could get upset about. But man, he got all that stuff. And one of the benefits of the powerful thing that my dad handed to me was he just played. He's a civil engineer. And so he created all of these games. He just made them up. He didn't know any better. And so he's doing all this interactive stuff in the 80s, like writing little puzzles and doing all of these like games with maps and just really cool stuff. So as a kid, I was immersed in that space of creating play. And then I got into teaching middle school, and it was just all about engagement, right? And getting games. And so I was so focused on play that I got a master's degree in 2008 in education and games for learning. Nice. And so since then, I started really digging into community development and engagement and those sorts of things around behavior change and how we can like really get into this space of this practice. And what I've really learned is that it's not about pushing against the things that we don't want, right? Like bringing solution to the shadow. There is no solution to the shadow.
Yes.
It's really about that ability of coming back to in the space of shadow, like, yep, I see that. And here's what I choose to play. Here's how I choose to engage with life as my biggest, brightest self, full of joy, full of positivity. Like I choose this thing. And that right there is that first, this is what I work with a lot of my clients with is, and a lot of my immersions is really looking at the context of society where it's on this generation to look into these electromagnetic frequencies, that sadness is the same sadness that every human has ever felt, right? It's that spooky action at a distance or the co-location of a frequency, right? Then it just becomes an issue of degree. So that practice of being able to say, I see you, sadness. Thank you for showing me how I have programmed that in my body and how I can then bring that just awareness. And then it's about stepping up into what I want rather than I have to fix this.
Yeah. Yes.
To me, it's about awareness. Like, oh, I see myself doing it. It's the same language. It's the same iterative process. Like, God, I'm so stupid. God, I'm so stupid. It's just like that remembrance of, I keep saying this and I'm not even aware of it. It's like a drop out of awareness to slip into those old patterns. So less about, I got to fix this, right? That knowledge of good and evil. I got to avoid the evil, and more about this space of how can I step into the joy of serving divine in this moment in the context of community. So coming into that space of resourcing for self, so that way I can come into being able to play, right? So maybe it's simple of like, I need to take a nap. I need to drink some water, right?
Yes.
Simple, basic stuff that a lot of us have forgot what even that feels like.
Yes.
Right? Just the simple basic things that is just that practice of like, okay, so I get like logically, oh, I recognize that I only slept 6.8 hours on my Aura Ring report. And so my REM sleep and all this deep, whatever. No, it's that space of saying like, oh, my body wants to lay down and rest now.
Yeah.
Like that ability for this executive function prefrontal cortex to be in service and awareness of the flow in my body, right? That's where all the trauma comes through. That's where divine comes through. It's like one big pipe. That nervous system is flowing up and back down, right? Yeah. This dance between me and God, right? Shiva and I don't know many of those Hindu backgrounds, but yeah. So that's where I get into it.
It's so funny. Random synchronicity that you talked about Poseidon and now Shiva. I had a call with a buddy earlier and we happened to bring up both of those terms. So that's really funny. But it's really cool because you talk a lot about very similar things that I talk about with regards to, instead of running away from what you don't want, run towards what you want, right? It's an energetic difference in just that, and the energy that you're putting into your intention. Yep. And personally, like, one of the reasons I created Connect with Cannabis, for instance, is because, I teach people how to gain connection through the power of cannabis, because we don't have a loneliness epidemic, right? To look at it that way, we have a lack of connection problem, right? Where people are unable to feel like they can connect to themselves first, right? Because intention, passion, purpose, all of that is an inside job. So, what's happening is they're externalizing their power out in the world, saying, oh, he or she made me feel that way, projecting that, negations. I can't do that. I couldn't do that. I shouldn't do this, right? Shooting all over themselves, using soft talk. Maybe I think I might want to do this someday, right? Like, versus like, I'm going to do this day, right? And the interesting thing about this is that when you're able to actually have the mind be the passenger instead of the driver and be able to tune into the feeling, then very similar to what you said, you're able to go, there's that thing again. There's that funny program. There's that malware.
Totally.
That's running that program of sadness. Thank you, program, for the reminder that I'm way too, I value myself way too highly to allow myself to continue to fall into that pattern. So what's the opposite?
Heard that. I love that. And to me, it's like, sometimes I get caught up in some of the semantics because I'm real sensitive to some of the framings and how they set us up better than others, right? Like any sort of resistance of mind is going to create a little trap for us. So that's why I love the idea of getting mind to be in service. Mind needs a job. That's why breath work is such a huge part of our meditation practices, right? That the Ujjayi breath or that ocean breath gives the mind something to focus on, to get that single pointedness like Ram Dass talks about.
Yes.
And I love reminding us that how simple it gets to be, right? That if I can just take a beat, disrupt the pattern, to not fix it, but to just come into awareness, to saying like, that's interesting. I'm calling myself a shithead right now. Or I just called myself an idiot when I made a simple mistake, right?
Yeah.
Or the space of like, oh gosh, I don't feel well, right? The awareness of like, I don't feel well and I don't know what it is. Just that like pause of saying like, not saying, oh, I'm depressed. Oh, I'm tired. Like having the clarity, right? That's several steps, like that expectation of the mind in our societies that we have all of the answers right now. And really it's about practicing the ability of wherever you're at and then coming back to this present moment to get this to be in service of that flow. So I love teaching people that it's that space of coming to neutral before stepping into positivity, because so much of our culture is like, oh, leave the ego at the door, or, none of that evil, wicked stuff, right? The what is it? Spiritual bypassing.
Yes.
Right. Is that space of like, no, your shadow's there to serve you just as much as your light is.
Yes.
Right. We choose joy when we have the opportunity. Yes. But in that space of learning from how you've programmed yourself with what you've been handed.
Yes.
You have access. All of your processes in your body have been genetically handed to you. And then you have been programming yourself since birth. And that's, I think, another piece that I love talking to people about is really stepping into individual sovereignty around how we've programmed that. Like even thinking about, like, my parents did not program me. That's a big shocker for people. Wait a minute. I was a 5-year-old and my mom did this, or I was 6-year-old and my uncle did that. It's like those things happen to you. And of course, all of the things that are the outside world, and the floods happen, right? All this stuff that's happening in the East Coast, right? That hurricane that just got external environments happen. And right, this is where we get to come into support for one another, but recognizing that that happened and what I made it mean were two different things. And the meaning is the programming, not what happened. So yeah, those traumas are awful, and that wasn't fair. Right? That's shitty that those people did that thing, or it's awful that that thing happened to us.
Yes.
So that compassion for that thing, and also all right, brother, all right, sister, now let's step up and reprogram your orientation to this experience. Right? And that's, to me, where we get to step up into that play. We get to take that leap of faith into this, like, oh my gosh, I'm nervous to step up and into that beingness of what I really want here. But all of that, to me, starts with that observer of recognize, oh my God. And these are some of the biggest breakthroughs that my clients have, is I never realized that I was holding myself in that cage that my dad gave me. Or I never realized that I was beating myself up the way that my mom did. All those sorts of things. Like, we pick these things up and we're the ones still doing it, but we externalize it. And then because of that, it keeps living in us, because that sovereignty of who actually put it there isn't being taken responsibility for.
Jeremy, you're my new best friend, man. This is literally exactly, it's so funny, man. Like, this is, I feel like the words coming out of your mouth are verbatim what I talk about all the time. Like,
Love it.
It's like, yes, you can argue for both sides. Did this happen to you in some way? Yes, you were 5. Yeah. Yes, you can argue for that story if you want to. But the question becomes, is that story going to help you as an adult now with no one else helping you? Is that going to help adult version of you actually feel empowered, right? Because if you believe that things happen to you, well, then essentially you're telling the universe, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm completely powerless, right? And you want to talk about, your ability to connect to your why, your ability to connect to your romantic partner, your ability to connect to anything when you feel as though you have no power. If that's, even if it's unconscious, because in most cases it is unconscious, right? People don't walk around going, I feel like I have no power. They're just wondering why these results are coming into their life. And the way I think about it, right, is like, there's a certain point in our lives where we start to become aware of very ancient things. I mean, these things are not new. They're just so forward thinking for our day, because we're so left brain and out of our right brain where experience happens. It's almost like you're waking up from like a drunken stupor and you're like, oh my God, I did that. Oh my God. And like, for anyone listening, I imagine if you've had like a drunk night where like you were like, I was definitely an idiot, there might be a point where you're like, that person shouldn't be mad at me. But then very quickly after, you're like, oh, I did puke on their backseat, So like, you're taking the power back for yourself. You're going, that was my fault. Yeah. I got to hit them up and go clean their car. Right. And so even though that sucks, you're hungover, it feels like shit. You're going to continue having friends. You're going to continue actually like learning. You're going to learn from that experience. Right. But imagine how silly it would be in that scenario if you're like, well, the bartender gave me 2 stronger drinks and I didn't know. So I don't have any reason to clean up the puke in the back of my best friend's car. That wasn't my fault, right? Like, you can see the silliness in that. It's the same thing. It's the same flavor we're talking about as to the analogy used. It just seems so different because it's like, it is. It's different, but it's same. That's how I see it. And so, I'm huge on all of this.
I mean, and all of that beautiful aspect of this play metaphor is really just an empowerment piece, because in my grad degree, one of the coolest learnings for me was a question that I left in my capstone work was, can you play a game if you are required to play? Oh, no, that's not it. Is a game still a game if you have to play? That's how I worded it. Yeah. And the answer is like, there's a really great book that I recommend to people that it's called Finite and Infinite Games. And it's so deep, man. It's not a long book, but it's really dense. And it's such an allegory for our world right now that we get caught up in these little finite games. In other words, we're looking for an end state. We're looking for a winning position. And we exist in an infinite game, that life is this infinite game. I am an infinite creature feeling these infinite feelings, right? And the power of creation flowing through me is infinite. It's been here beyond time, right? It's beyond time and space, right? And so this place of who we get to be in itself is this game. And so in that context of the infinite game, we get to live. And that is the finite game. That's the most significant finite game is I woke up today. Mm-hmm. How do I want to play my game today?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But so many of us wake up into the context of what we remember, which is that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, is that we remember, which is great because that gets to serve us. Hey, I'm not going to go do that thing that I learned yesterday that I did not like. Right. Or like you said, like I puked in my buddy's seat last night. He's a really great friend. I better go over there and clean up that thing because that was really awful of me to, even though it was all these other things that we cascade into. And yeah, which opens up the other thing to me is thing that I love talking about and teaching is a simple, so I teach 3 main triads. One of the abilities that I teach with this coming into awareness is just simply creating space for the silence of stillness. And so the idea kind of really puts the mind-body complex into really the practice of your ability of flowing frequencies, right? Flowing electromagnetic currents through your body, the awareness of all of these synapses firing in your brain, and then sending that stuff back into your body, which creates this loop or the holes that we fall into of, I already know, and it's bad, and this is going to be another bad one, right? It's the outcome's already decided because I know how it is.
Yes.
Rather than the game of like, hey, I know the path that I'm not going to take. I'm going to do it differently today to see how God is going to surprise me with abundance and joy, right? Because that's a frequency that I embody that then opens me up to see things differently. The context of my choices, options in my brain are vastly different. And then I get to, then what I'm doing just flows out of that, right? That whole Buddhist saying of a man does nothing and nothing is left undone, right?
Yes.
It's just so, it's like you said earlier, we've gotten so into our heads, which is wonderful, right? We've expanded our intelligence beyond what we ever hoped or imagined, right? We're out beyond all of the science fiction of 1800, right?
Yes.
And into this space of the real human potential that we have of this practice of empathic awareness, right? Which really, when I say empath, what I mean is the ability of bringing my attention of my mind's processes into what's happening inside of my body to sort out, oh, that's hunger. Oh, that's tired. Oh, that's horny. Oh, that's upset. Oh, that's sadness. Oh, that's not mine. Right? Or, oh my God, God's speaking to me. I'm being called to go over to this. I don't know why I have to go to the neighbor and say this thing. Or I'm going to go pick up a jug of milk and stopping here. I don't know. I'm making all this stuff up, but it's like that space of like getting this into this game of service to what's flowing and how we get to be so powerful in service to one another.
Yes. And what's so funny about that too, what just came through to me is like, basically what I've been seeing is that people on a grand scale, society, whatever you want to call it, is challenged with the actual nature of the mind, right? We are too smart for our own good, right? We start developing our mind at 6 years old without any, except for religion. Yes, there are definitely pockets of this, but as a Western society specifically, we're not taught about the soul. We're not taught about these things. They're all woo-woo, right? Like, I mean, we're barely even taught about taxes. Like, and we expect them to talk about consciousness, And so, what I notice is that unlike traditional Indian cultures, which actually valued the child as like, hey, they need to go do their own thing until they're 12. And then when they're 12, they're given the opportunity to go to school and learn. But if so, they have to develop an identity that is one which is global in nature. So they don't see someone from America, they see a brother or sister. They don't see someone from China, they see a brother or sister, right? Because they're aware that the mind is a tool that is like a very double-edged sword, right? You have to really know how to wield it for it to help you and serve you. And so what you're talking about is the reintegrating process of actually learning how the mind can serve us and learning how intention creates connection, right? And with all the challenge and connection we're having right now, really like realizing back in like to use the drunk person analogy again, it's like, okay, did the bartender serve the drinks too heavy? Sure, that could have been a fact, right? But my intention is making sure my friend feels like he's loved and cared for after I puked in the backseat of his car, right? So it's the intention that drives the experience, and the intention for me comes from whatever I'm feeling. If I'm feeling sad, my intention is to connect with someone or something or myself. If I'm feeling happy, my intention, could be example for then like to go spread it to other people and help other people pick up on that vibration, right? But it all starts from intention, and the intention comes from the body, and it comes from, either essentially wanting less of a feeling or more of another feeling. Right. And so I love talking about these things.
I love that. And that reminds me that so much of our thinking, I love what you said. And that to me is another, any manifestation is a practice.
Yes.
And it's going to work for some people and not for others.
Yes.
And it's up to each one of us individually to discover what works for us. Right. And this is, to me, the big shift in this human experience that we're coming into, is that we've gotten so smart. And now we're recognizing that can be used for an outcome. And it's this frequency that flows through us, right? Our beingness is what I teach in my map that I work on, which is, it's a mind-body map that does yin and yang, which is feminine and masculine. And so teach, observe, choose, do, and be in those 4 modalities. But really, the thing that I started learning and working with clients in that map is, as we start integrating into all of these explorations, that really, that oneness, that single pointedness is not, it's not possible for human. That really the practice of oneness in your humanity is being present with a fundamental duality. With that fundamental duality, like you're saying, it's really a paradox for mind. Yes. And mind is never going to get to know. It can learn, right? There's infinite amount of learning, but to that space of getting to that pedestal of like, oh, I won the game, right? I figured out human, not possible. Not possible because of the nature of who we are, right?
Yes.
It's just, to me, I think that's where it is about that space of practice. Like, can I have compassion for the thing that was irritating for me yesterday, for that person? Like, if I'm the guy whose buddy puked in my car, can I be forgiving for him when he shows back up to take responsibility, right? Can I hold him in regard of who I know him to be rather than to who he sunk him into being, right?
Yes. Can I have compassion seeing that I've been that person who maybe didn't puke in the backseat of a car, but also like didn't think about his or her actions before I did them, right? Like, can I realize, can I see myself in them, Yeah.
And it really becomes that, like, the true, deepest, most profound compassion is really, like you said, can we come to play with it? Like, oh, bro, you totally puked in my back seat, man. What's that about? Like, why are you treating yourself like this? You matter to me as my friend. And now it's cost me something. And so I've got skin in the game. So I want to play around with this idea of like how I can support you as your friend. But that's not common. We're just learning how to do that.
Yeah.
Right? Especially among men.
Oh, it's ridiculous. And, it's funny how you mentioned those finite games earlier. What do we do? And I've been guilty of this too, before I throw myself on a soapbox here. But like, it's like, oh, my seat, what am I going to do about it? We play a finite game as if this car is us, first of all, and then we're going to have it forever. And it really matters, when in reality, it's an inconvenience for sure. Right. If you want to look at it that way, that's how I would view it. But it's also a huge convenience on the other side to, like you were saying, connect deeper to someone who might be going through something. And, it's funny how coaching right now is getting so big, right? And I have a cosmic giggle about this. I'm a coach, right? Like I love it. I think I know how powerful it is. And that's why it's so funny to me, because it's seen as this new age thing, right? Like, oh, we know about therapy, but coaching is like new, right? And it's like, do you guys realize this is like the most human nature thing in human nature? Like helping another human with their experience of life feel more comfortable with the experience of feeling alive in some way, shape, or form, make a little more sense out of it. I mean, we're all going through a psychedelic experience, which we quantify and call life. But really, I mean, if you think about this, think about all the animals exist. Think about the nature of reality. I mean, this is a psychedelic experience, like as I know it to be. You're essentially helping someone through a trip.
Yeah. I mean, and this is one of the things I love when people get hung up on psychedelics is like, man, breathing is a psychedelic.
Yes.
And one of the things that I like to point out is I'm a lead facilitator for a light and sound therapy tool called Sound Self.
Oh, cool.
And if anybody wants to go check it out, it's at soundself.com. I facilitate that here in town and in Austin. And the idea of it is that you've got LED glasses, closed eyes, and so there's a flicker, and you're laying on a vibroacoustic bed. And so you're bathing in sound. You got headphones, noise canceling headphones, and then you tone, or you go through a meditation and you tone. And for those that don't know, it's like and what it is that you're rhythmically breathing, so you're over oxygenating your brain, and then that tone is what you're bathing in. So your layered symphonics are your own voice. The vibroacoustic bed is your own voice. The lights are paired to the frequency of your own voice. So you're creating this experience that is then taking you into this rabbit hole, diving you deep into your body, and the lights bring you into and open your pineal gland, and it drops some endogenous DMT into your brain. And so different people have different abilities to be able to do that, plus their state of where they're at. So all these conditions going in, that is like really this space of meaning making is on you, not the world around you, right? You're not stuck in this space. This is what you get to do, right? All of these things are happening, like you said earlier, for us.
Yes.
And so this really is this, like, to come back to the thread of our conversation here about psychedelics. Is psychedelics do two things, really, in my experience. Is one, it drops you into your body and then gets you into that light beam to be able to like have a different association. It really makes the neural pathways able to be malleable, right? Yeah. And so most of the time you're remembering things from when you were a kid. You're remembering frequencies in your body from a long, long time ago. Like in my case, you're born into it. And it was just trauma on top of trauma from the get-go. Lots of people with that, and lots of people with that are coming up, right? That it doesn't really matter what trauma you experience. That's just the situation. What really matters is how you opened yourself up to that frequency unknowingly, because you were a fucking kid, right? You didn't know. And then like you tapped into that. So that ability that you were born with, this proclivity to open up to the ethers, right? This, the dark space where God lives and births from, right? And then into the light of creation, of making things into awareness, right? You were given this life to have this remembering, to have this is what you get to play along. You get to co-create with God, right?
Yes.
And it's just all this just wonderful awareness of bringing us back to context. Like you said, this powerful mind, remembering, oh, that's right. We were in a tribe where we all supported each other, not to fix the broken part, but to remind us of who we really are.
Yeah. And to show us that even the quote unquote broken parts are actually what make us unique. Right. And so there's no right or wrong unless you assign that meaning to it, you know? And
totally.
And the way I like to think about it too, and I love analogies, and I really think about this life as an opportunity to have the best love story ever, right? Where, you know, it's like the classic rom-com. Boy meets girl, right? You're a kid, boy meets girl, or, you know, whatever. And then boy loses girl, which is like adolescence, you know, falling out of like, you know, everything is just like what you can see. It's measurable, it's quantifiable science. There's nothing qualitative to it in the typical Western world, at least I'm talking about. And then at a certain point, you know, you start to find yourself again. And what is yourself? You start to find out that you are God. And oh my God, if I'm God, that means everyone else is God too. And if everyone else is God, that means we all have special powers. And wait, if we all have special powers, then is anything actually wrong? And so you actually start to fall back in love with yourself, which I feel for me has been the coolest, most fun, most fulfilling aspect of my life thus far. Is every step of the way, realizing that the other side is worth it. And every time I go through an experience where I get challenged and I come out the other side a better, stronger version of me, I get a little bit more close to being able to now in any situation go quicker to how is this happening for me? Okay, what lesson is here? Let me laugh about it. Let me stop taking myself so seriously. Oh, my car broke down. Okay, yes, I had somewhere very important to be, you know, because I'm so serious, right? Like start laughing at it. Not because I don't actually take myself seriously to a certain degree, but because I'm not willing to take myself so seriously that it affects my experience of life. That's where it really starts to go the other way, you know?
Yeah. I love that exploration of the belief, I am God. It's such a polarizing belief, right? Yeah. On one hand, people that are going through these powerful entheogenic awakenings, they see that connection to divine, where it's like, oh my God, we're all one.
Yes.
Right. And that is just a perception, which is only a part of the story. So you are God, and also you are separate from God, right? And that to me is one of those fundamental paradoxes, one of those fundamental dualities that you get to be present. And I love talking about it, like you're saying, they're like falling in love. I love talking about it as being really at this edge of the void, that I get to step up into being my biggest, most brightest self in devotion to this thing that really is, I'm throwing myself into this chasm in a space of sacrifice, in the space of just pure devotion, of just like ravenous. I am a warrior and I bring myself in service to this highest good for all of us. And so to say that I am God begs us that opportunity to step into the humility of that calling, is really to be in devotion to that being that is flowing to us. And so I go through these really wonderful, my judgment, obviously, meditations, guided meditation of being at that void where your skin is tingling with spirit infusing you that is now you. And so that thing that was not you is now you. And so in that space, this stuff that you get to flow is God. Yes. It's God herself flowing through you from nothingness. It's just this mind that we've grown into to be able to develop all of the wonderful things that our intellect has developed, that is focused on the duality of not God. God is that thing, whatever your experience separate of that. Yeah, that it's a frequency really flowing through my body. And I attach my experience to that frequencies, to a big white dude with a big beard on a throne, or multiple deities that are the Hindu stories, right? Or the Buddhist Ma, right? Or the Taoist, the Tao, right? It's all different perspectives of a frequency flowing through all things. Yes. And so mind fundamentally it's unknowable, but we get to practice that pursuit of relating to it. And that's one of the things that I love bringing people back to, is it's so powerful to say that I am God. Yes. This stuff that's flowing through me is me. And it's also that same oneness that is God as well. So it's both at the same time. I am in service to God, and that Godhood flowing to me, that I am this divinity. Yes. That I am this co-creator. That I come back to that real fundamental duality of the oneness of being present with that duality is both at the same time, right? So then I get to bring that perspective and apply that to whatever situation I'm in, to recognize, am I more on the thinking that I'm so powerful that I am God? Or am I more on the, oh no, I'm just this poor, pitiful, weepy little human? Which side are you on? You're not either, you're both. And so you get to come back to that present awareness of the practice. That there's it's what is it? Joe Dispenza says it this way: it's holographical, spherical, right? It's energetic. It's an electromagnetic current running through my body that comes from this space that we can't figure out, that triggers all of these pathways, right? These neurochemicals on top of these ideas that could be the other way in, right? Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory addresses that, right? All of Bruce Lipton's stem cell research that talks about that. But this is just the beginning of this stuff, bro, with all these biometrics, all this epigenetics, that really it's all going to come down to the practice of belief, right? I could have this therapy, I could have that magic, I could have this ceremony, I could go on this entheogenic deep dive into all the plant medicines. But if I'm really holding on to the belief that it's not going to work, it won't.
Exactly. You know, it's funny. The deeper I go into plant medicine ceremonies, the simpler the lessons become, right? Yeah. And that's another cosmic jingle we could talk about. But, you know, I went very deep on 5-MeO and just came out of it being like, whatever you believe you become. It's that simple. Like literally, that's like I could never do another plant medicine experience again and still understand what I believe is one of the most empowering parts of info. Because basically what that says is it's up to what story you want to tell yourself, right? Like
totally. And I love that.
Yeah. And I'm always, I'm a fan of telling people, like, we don't really know anything other than we are, period. That's it. Right. I am that I am. That's it. That's the only truth. Like, I love that I feel like we can know. So otherwise, what I tell people is, so long as you're not hurting other people, believe whatever makes you have more fun in life. If you want to believe Santa Claus is real and you really want to believe that because it helps your experience of life be more colorful, Who's to tell you can't, right? So long as you're not messing with other people's lives and things like that, it's like, we don't really know anything. And so when people ask me like, well, how do you know this? It says, well, two ways. One, I've had the direct experience of it, but number two, I don't know. I mean, it's my own experience. I have no idea. It just works for me. That's why I choose.
This is how I've experienced it. Yeah. You said two things that I want to pick up on. One, I want to put a pin in is I am that I am. I love that one. I want to get into that in a second.
Yeah.
But the other one is what you believe you become.
Yes.
The way that I've broken that out in the model that I teach with the Observe Be is that's the feminine. In this dimension, everything is birthed from the feminine.
Yes.
Right? From the void, things get brought forth, right? Scripture talks about that. All of the Gnostic, all of the mysticism, all of it is that space of like, okay, everything in this dimension comes from nothing. That's the magic of this dimension. And so that space, like you said, like what you believe, you become. That to me is a step beyond, like what I choose to believe starts with coming into observation.
Yes.
That if I choose, that if I'm still holding on to a belief that I put in when I was 6, because Dad did this thing that beat it into me and I held on to that. Yep. You know what? I'm a sinner saved by grace. At the end of the day, I'm a sinner and I need salvation of some unearned gift, right? That I now become that sort of thing. And energetically, that foundation is what I'm building, all of these decisions and all of that choice, doing, being from that framing. So looking at that, like what I'm believing is really that, what am I sitting in observation of? Because then I can choose to say like, oh, that belief, either one is just not true. That's most of it. It's just flat out not true, but we don't get that deep. We don't get that. We don't give ourselves that space or that silence or that stillness to be able to see that thing. It's one modality calls it the transparent beliefs, right? All of these things that we programmed our prefrontal cortex with, that we told ourselves our own version of what was being presented to us, right? That is no longer there because we became an adolescent and all that stuff got wrapped up in a neat little bow and said, oh, I am whatever we're now trying on. And then we've been practicing it ever since.
Yeah.
Right. And so that space of getting, like you said, I love it, that what we believe we become, right, is we get to look at really, what am I being here? I was the guy that threw up in his back seat and he's my friend. But most of the time we don't. We're stuck in not observing, but we're stuck in the choose. I'm a bad friend. I don't want to look at this thing. I'm afraid because I think I'm going to lose a friend. So I don't go over there and help him. And guess what? I lose a friend. Or, you know what? I go over there and I make it about the bartender who served me too much. And I'm shifting blame, right? I'm really choosing to be that blame. All of those are choices that are not looking at the frame of observation, right? The fundamental belief, right? That we don't really get that authentic or with ourselves to even be able to show up that way with others.
Yes. And that's the beauty in like one of the core techniques that I've learned as a coach is a system called Lifted, which is all just story work and language work and things like that.
Yeah.
And the power, we often think it's pretty simple, right? Like that's one of the things I will think a lot when it comes to, writing something down, right? Journaling about it, writing something down. You're in the 1% of people if you even choose to write something down. That's the funny thing, is that most people never write down what they're actually feeling. The degree to how few people ever write down anything about what's going on in their lives, right? Like the concept of journaling is something that I downplay a lot, right? I'm like, oh, it's so simple, it can't be that effective. When really it actually is, right? And I feel for so many people, they might be challenged with something similar, which is why I mentioned it. Like, a lot of times that's what I mean when I say we're too smart for our own good. A lot of the things that are simple in nature, that are the most freeing, we're like, oh, it can't be that simple, right? Because everything in life is complicated. That's the story I had, story a lot of people have. So, it's just very interesting to me, the power of writing things down. I mean, words are our spells, right? They are what allow us to actually manifest things into existence. Abracadabra, with my word, I create,
I love that.
Yeah,
man. I love that. Journaling has been a big part of my experience and still is, and there's something about embodiment of getting hand to move in the way that we've learned. Like that takes us back to childhood, making letters, making words, making a sentence, making sense in this flow of experience of what I'm thinking, right?
Yes.
That most of the time we don't think linearly. our thinking follows the experience of the energy flowing through our body. We snap from thing to thing to thing, and we don't even come into that space of awareness. I love that for that reason of getting that perspective. But also, have you ever noticed that forces you to slow down?
Yes.
And how many times you're like, God, I can't keep up with my thinking. It's like, exactly.
Yeah.
Keep writing.
Yes. Recalibrate.
Do that. Like, have you ever done morning pages with the Artist's Way?
Yeah, so I've heard about the morning pages, and what I do is I always wake up and I'll journal for a couple pages. My friend Kim actually does 3 pages every morning, so I'm not sure if it's the same technique, but I'd love for you to tell me a little bit more about it.
Sure. So the modality, to what I understand, that she recommends in her book, and I'm drawing a blank on her name right now, but it's wonderful. I love it. It's another modality, but the idea of what she recommends in the book is 3 pages. The function of that is to get up right away and that you're doing something, right? You're embodying accomplishment.
Yes.
Right? And she says, like, just let mind flow onto paper. So it gets this integration is really what it's about, is getting the chatter, getting the quickness, getting the busyness, getting all of these firings of what I think I know is happening from all of the things that I'm bringing myself back up to speed into, right? In this body. And I'm just letting it flow. It's okay, mind. And I love it because it's saying it's okay to think. Thinking is powerful, right? All the shitty beliefs are not our enemy. It's us thinking that that's the way that it is and holding on to it well beyond it being of service to us, right?
Yes.
And so the morning pages to me are a practice of every morning. I'm the one that says, like, mind, here we go. And so I've taken it and shifted it, because sometimes it can get a little bit dull, right? It loses its juice. And so I started dream journaling in the morning, letting it flow, like grab my journal right there and write down everything I can remember. It makes it, to me, so much easier, because a lot of people get stuck on I don't know what to write. It's like, great. Start in the book. The lady says, it doesn't matter, right? I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. That's one modality. But to me, I love the double punch, right? The double efficacy of, if I'm dream journaling, it gives me something to get through, and then keep flowing. What do I think about that? What does that bring up for me? Keep writing. I'm already writing. Just let it keep flowing. Let it keep. Yes. What does this mean? What is it? What do I want to do about this? What does this bring up? What do I remember? What is that? What do I want to, how does that, like, open me up for all of these prompts that we can use that as a springboard into our day. Yeah. So that space of getting mind to say, it's okay, welcome back to body, right? I am the one that's in awareness of what's happening here, and I'm putting myself discipline in to say, like, here we go. I might not want to do it, but I'm writing down this dream of, it could be like, I remember I was a river. That's it. Great. Write down, I dreamed of a river. Mm-hmm. And now think about, maybe I want to go to a river. Just keep on flowing. The flow of thinking, right, is the idea, is like, whatever the mind is thinking, write it down.
Yes.
And it could open up something that's like, man, it's making me think about that time when my mom took me to the river. And then that one time that she, did that thing and said that thing to me, that just this cascade of memory. And then, what I find is how powerful that is. But man, I haven't thought about that since I was like 22. And then I go back, hey, Mom, remember that time? You'd start telling her the story, and she's like, that's interesting. I don't remember it happening that way at all. You did this part over here, but I remember this whole thing. And you go like, oh my God, I didn't realize. I thought it was this, but it was really this whole other thing. And this just like powerful gifts that get to come through when we get this to be in service to this flow of what's getting us to experience us, right?
Yes. And I love that part about how you change it depending on how you feel, because for me, one of the main challenges of getting my mind out of the way was the rigidity, right? The pattern of rigidity. Nope. If I'm going to do 3 pages, got to be three pages every single day, right? And what is the opposite of play? Whatever that is, right? Whatever that energy is the opposite of play. Yeah. And the way I think about it all the time is like, listen, I might prefer chocolate ice cream, but it doesn't mean I want chocolate ice cream every day for the rest of my life. It might mean like, okay, this 3 pages thing seems it works on the days where I wake up feeling ready to go. But hey, on a day that I'm not, I'm going to show myself grace. I'm going to show myself compassion, and I'm going to ask, what do I need that day? Maybe I want to draw a picture instead, right? Maybe I want to draw. Maybe I want to, explore painting. Maybe I want to, talk to a friend right in the morning, right? Who knows? But as long as I'm doing something about Well, like for my goal, right? Because again, the mind is a serval mechanism. You create a goal for it and it will lead that out, right? But the way in which you can get to that goal, being able to open that up to many different types of experiences, that way your inner child can actually have fun with it, right? Because think about it, as a kid, like you might have loved going to an amusement park, but if you were going there every day, it probably wouldn't have been as fun after a while, right? So giving yourself like the grace to be able to move through the seasons of how you're feeling and buy the ticket and take the ride into that is, I feel, so potent and so powerful.
I love that. I love that. Saying goals and what you were just talking about with that feeling reminded me of Joe Dispenza's work around visualization. And that visualization is that opportunity to come into the observer of your experience and really embodying a beingness, embodying a frequency of what you want. And to me, I've found that goals are best made from that position.
Yes.
Saying like, oh, these are the things that I want it's from my beingness rather than here's what I think I'm in, like, because I'm not aware of this stuff, especially early on in our awakening. Right? That goals made from the rational mind are made from the conditioned programming that we put ourselves in. Not wrong, not bad, right? It's all that unfolding. But if we can continue to come back to that space of who is it that I get to be, right? The game of this thing is being presented to me. And I have my goals and I have this thing, but the flow of the day went rapidly away from my goals. Right? That I stepped out of bed and I stubbed my toe and now I'm in a hospital or whatever, right? Now there's a cascade of things. And so like being able to be, like you said, letting go of the rigidity of mind really is in that being space, right? Of the embodiment piece of playing with the masculine, feminine. I really do prefer the yin and the yang, right? That the openness and the manifestation, right? I get to play with that void of the infinite possibilities and this teeny tiny one infinite one of the 10,000 things, right? And just being in that space of like, maybe this, but maybe not, because obviously this whole thing came in.
Yes. Yeah. And it's so funny too, because, if you think about the human being as like the human being, the form part, the being the formless part, then like, that's the perfect dance between what we were chatting about earlier, how you are God, but you're also separate from God, right? It's an and, right? Not instead of a but, right? It's not you're God, but you're also not God. It's you're God and you're also not God, right? So, I see that being a perfect pattern interrupt or cognitive shift between like, okay, what are you doing for your human side every day? And what are you doing for your being side, right? And finding a balance somewhere within that where you're understanding like, oh yeah, I'm both those things. Cool. Like, and I'm not identified with, I need to be this one, more than the other one or having a certain preference or meaning attached to it. It's just, I am that I am. I am that which I know I am. These two different things. That's it. I love that.
That's right. It reminded me of this idea of coherence, right? You know much about heart math and
I've heard about it, but I'd love for you to go into it a little deeper.
So I teach coherence, resonance, and vibrance. And the way that I teach those is an embodied experience that mind gets to qualify. That coherence, in the way that they define it, is really coming back to a more solid, aligned self, right? And I call that faith.
Yes.
Right? When who I am, I'm able to step up and take bigger leaps because I have no doubt about who I am. When I'm questioning myself, when there's no clarity, I have doubt. I don't know. I have this lack of faith, this fear, right? This unknown, all that sort of space, that I'm out of coherence. It's not wrong or bad. That's the practice of, okay, I'm out of coherence. How do I bring myself back to this space of being in faith? That to me draws me back to that relating with divine, right? That relating with that fundamental duality, right? Goes into the space for the silence of stillness. But the faith then begets resonance, right? Where two, like you and I, having this really rad experience. It's like, man, I'm meeting a long lost brother, right?
Yes.
That is resonance. That when coherence of self, you've done enough work to know who you are, right? This reflection of like, oh man, you say this thing is remembering, oh my God, this thing I'm excited about. This feeling is hope. It's resonance. We're resonating our coherence. Yes. And if we're not in true coherence, we're projecting out something that's inauthentic. And then what starts happening is that we've got these mind things that run a cult, basically, where you have to be something that I'm projecting back to you and vice versa. And then if you're able to come back to coherence and recognize resonance, and then when we fall out of resonance, we get to understand one another and stretch, right? We get to learn and grow together and come back to resonance and agreement, right? And then we're better for it. Our relationship is deeper for it. That intimate connection that we have with our partner is more value to it now that we've gone through that difficult thing.
Yes.
And then that, as we have more resonance, begets vibrance. And vibrance, to me, is where Christ says, where two or more are gathered, I will be among them. Is really Christ as an allegory for love, like pure love.
Yeah.
Even saying pure love, it's just love. It's the frequency of love.
Yeah.
It's not unconditional, but it is unconditional. It's not pure, but it is pure.
Yeah.
Right? It is all of those things that we put these qualifiers on because we forget, we come out of it. And that's a frequency, right? David Hawkins' work points towards that. That embodiment of vibrance. It begets its own light of its own beingness, right? Where we come together in resonance. I bring my coherence into meet your coherence. We resonate together, and then we have this space of vibrance pouring out from that. It's like if people are attracted to the fire, right? We love cults. I want to be part of something. How do I do all of the things right to be? And that's where it becomes the cult, right?
Yes.
And so that space of what you're talking about, I love it because it triggers that space of how can I step up to more faith here is an internal one that then brings me to serve hope in an external way and beget, right? Where two people come together, they beget, they have a baby, right? They got a love baby. In a way, that's what we're doing, right? We're making a love baby right here, right? It's totally the way it works, right? We didn't know each other. There was a void. Neither one of us knew each other existed. We bring our coherence into, oh man, this dude's fucking rad, man. I love this guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And again, each phase is a practice of a unique ability to bring myself into the practice of faith, to know when divine is truly flowing through me. That's my lived personal experience. And it looks like so many different things. That I get to experience this being met with someone who's doing that work for themselves. And it's a frequency. I don't need to tell you. I don't need you to tell me your story. We know it's like, oh, I feel it. I love it. It's that drop in. Yeah. And so many people don't feel that because all they've ever known is I'm not in coherence. I'm not in authenticity because I don't want to look at those things because it's going to threaten what I think is the reality. Which is not the reality. It's just what I held on to with my experience. It's one little piece of reality, right? The duality, right? The fundamental duality is that it's not reality because there's so much more to it, but it is. It's a teeny tiny little limited slice that's no longer serving you and you hate it.
Yes.
But you're holding on to it.
Yes.
You keep doing it.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You can do that if you want.
Yeah. It's like arguing for your limitations versus arguing for your possibilities, right? Like,
preach.
Yes.
Preach. Yeah.
It's like, that's what I tell people, when they're like, I can't do this. I can't do that. We'll go around in the circle basically where, I'll be like, all right, well, have you done hard things before? Maybe they quantify this thing as too hard. Yeah, I've done hard things before, blah, blah. And then we eventually circle around to like, all right, so what you just told me is there's no logical reason why you can't do this. So if you want to believe you can't do this, then you can argue for that story. But let me ask you, after what we just went through, do you actually feel you can't do this? Or do you feel like there's something peculiar here happening? And half the time, more than half the time, they'll say, yeah, there's something weird happening. And I don't know exactly how to put my finger on it. Okay, cool. Yep. We'll stop right there because that's all you need is to go, maybe something isn't right. Soft talk acknowledged, right? And then from there, new possibilities can open, new awarenesses can open because you're actually questioning it yourself. Beautiful. Yeah. And what you're believing is changing, That's beautiful. Yeah.
So that questioning is what I would put into the model that I teach is like, just come into observation of it. This thing that I think is happening may be what's happening. But it also may not be. There might be something else. And just coming into the awareness of what it does energetically is it brings my sovereignty back into here. And it gives me the power to say, I am having my own individual experience.
Yes.
And the exploration that you're taking people through is really to previous times that they had that experience and made that synapse association in the prefrontal cortex of meaning. This feeling, this vibration, this flow of phenomena, this evidence, this whatever, any sensation that's entering my field is me. All that means this. And it's like, that's a part of it. It's almost always, that's only a part of it.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I love this because really it brings us back into that space, like, of remembering as early as you can to remember the first time, that transparent belief that's really running the show. Those big, giant, huge blocks that simple little 6-year-old made it mean, like, oh, this is who I am. I'm the bad kid. I'm not, like most of us, it's some version of I'm not good enough, right? I didn't measure up or whatever, right? But in that space, then the nuance of the word and the languaging, that is what I told myself. For me, mine was, I don't really matter. I don't matter. That is, I don't matter. Like, I don't matter. Like, I have no value in this space. But the way I said it to myself was, I don't really matter.
Yeah.
And even now, like, I feel that coming up because it's all of this flow of this experience that is the work that I've got to do on this man right here.
Yes.
That really goes back to me being present with that little boy that's still in here energetically.
Yes.
And sitting with those times of taking that role energetically, of being the angel that was standing behind me when I was getting in trouble, or when I was getting yelled at, or when I was being beaten or locked in a room or whatever, that I get to be there with him. And I think that observation is some of the most, the beginning of the purest divinity experiences, that God is always with us. There's no bucket. There's no deep, dark hole of shame you can dig yourself into. There's nothing you can do to separate yourself from that love. There's nothing that you can think, believe, nothing that exists that can remove you from the love of God, that love, that earth, that Gaia has for us, right? That she just is only, it's that mother's love, right? That's like, this is mine. I stand with this one because I birthed this one, right? I made this one for me. It's that beloved. I love that beloved mechanism. That I am my beloved's and my beloved's is mine. And it's like this ride or die, right? That space of really coming into now to be able to say, like, that, from that observation, that I choose love for myself, and then I can show up in service and compassion to others. It just changes the game, man.
Absolutely. Well, it puts you into the game for a lot of times the first time, right? Like, because until then, you're externalizing everything and it's unconscious, right? Like, this is the thing that I really want people that are listening to understand, is that, like, you can be doing a lot of stuff and still be unconscious to things. Like, I imagine there's so many more things I'm going to become conscious of, maybe a minute from now, maybe a year from now, whatever, that, it's a revolving door, right? And that's why it's so important. Like, I feel like there's all these different parts of the process out there, like, enjoy the journey, be present, but it's like no one's put them together, and it's like, this is the part where you get to enjoy the journey, because, like you were saying, you're never going to figure it out. That's not the purpose of life, right? That's just the mind in the driver's seat thinking, like, all that is figuring shit out. That's all life is for me, is figuring stuff out. That's because your mind is running the show, when really the mind is just meant to be, well, you were talking about, a vessel for what's coming from your heart to actually manifest into 4D reality, Yeah, man. That reminds me, if we got a few more minutes. Yeah, absolutely.
The third triad that I teach begins with awareness. And I love awareness rather than consciousness. It's all semantics, right? We're taking these little like sounds that our mouths and throats make into words that have all of these meanings. But to me, there's a usefulness of it, of how it lands for us. So for me, I love the word awareness, because it is about giving the mind something to do. Like, come into awareness, be the observer of your own experience and see what's behind what you think is happening. And that begets the second piece of that triad, which is presence. That presence awareness. Some people say present awareness, but I like presence. And it's intentional, because it really does bring me into that space of being in the observing of what I'm being first. In that space of God's meeting me, and she's asking me, she's in observation of me as I'm being in observation of this thing. And she asks me, who are you being in this moment? How are you orienting, right? How are you observing? Like, what do you think is happening here? Right? And it's just what you think is happening. It's just this flow of what happened yesterday that you think is still happening today. Right?
Yes.
And then that space begets the third piece, which presence awareness then yields creativity. So that presence awareness creativity is starting with the space of like, okay, I'm going to come into awareness of the presence here. That maybe hunger is present. Maybe at the same time, my spouse said something that was hurtful, that landed in hurtfulness for me. And then maybe also I'm in a situation of transition where I moved apartments, whatever. Or maybe I got into an accident yesterday in my body, or I did a big workout yesterday and like slightly God knows what, right? Or I ate something inflammatory for breakfast, right? All these things, right? Or there's an energy in the Schumann resonance that is really triggering something from my heritage that I've been handed to. So it's like none of it is really mine, but it's all being handed to me for me, right?
Yes.
And so that space of like, okay, I'm in awareness of the presence of this flow, right? Is that duality of I am God and God is my beloved.
Yes.
And then draws me into creativity, that is the ability. That's the fundamental ability that I teach is presence, awareness, creativity. Is how can I come into creating? Because creating is a game and I love to play.
Yes.
Right. And maybe the game that I want to play right now is I got to put myself into a nap.
Yes.
I need to go eat something, right? I need to go say I'm sorry, or I need to go tell someone no.
Yes. That is a huge one right there. Like that's one of the biggest challenges I've had in my journey is realizing, I don't know what you are in human design or if you know offhand, but I'm a 5-1 projector. And part of the 5 is to take on everyone's problems, right? Almost like a martyr in a way, but not intentionally, just like, hey, I can help you, right? And so there's this unconscious belief I've been working on where I've really been noticing this people pleasing in me, right? Where, look, I want everyone to be happy and I want to help ease the world's suffering.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine, right? That can be true. But also, at what point am I suffering and not giving myself the out to stop suffering, right? And at that point, am I actually worshiping myself? And therefore, are the interactions I'm having with everyone else, are they actually picking up the energy that I want to give them? Or are they picking up the energy of someone who does not serve himself first? And so that was like a moment, all around saying
it's
no.
all so powerful, right?
Yeah.
It's so wonderful. Like, and with my map and with these 3 fundamental triads that I teach, it really becomes so simple, right? Of just like bring yourself back into the awareness of what's happening right now, yes. And what do you get to be,
yes.
And just give it like that space right there. It's like, just give yourself a beat, like that clarity of what you think is happening, and then keep practicing, right? It's all just right there in front of us. Keep playing that game, come back to it.
Yeah, I love that. Jeremy, this was so much fun, man. I could literally chat with you for hours. We're going to have to do a round 2 on this for sure. Cool. I'll have you hop on the other podcast too, Highly Optimized, and I get you on there. I'm curious, where can I send people to connect with you, to learn more about Empath X, to learn from you, all those things?
Yeah. So if you want to just dip your toes, check me out on the social medias. I do Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Jeremy Koester. And I'm sure you'll put that in the notes.
I got you.
And then, my website's empath-x.com.
Cool. Awesome, man. And I have one final question for you, Jeremy, if you're up for it. What do you say, my man?
Of course.
You down? All right,
yeah,
cool.
Let's play one more.
Yes. If someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what piece of advice would Jeremy Koester give them to allow them the smoothest experience possible?
Presence, awareness, creativity.
Yes.
That space of like really slow down, take your time, be with the unfolding experience that you've decided that you want to step into.
Yes. And I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, guys, one of the main reasons I love having people like Jeremy on is specifically because, we can talk about psychedelic experiences all we want, But funny stories are great. Like, I'll definitely continue having them on, but they don't really teach you a lot about, what to do when you're in a situation. Like, all the things we talked about today are so incredibly powerful and potent as tools.
Yep.
I mean, understanding the thing about the mind that we talked about, that you are God, but you're also separate from God. All of these things can help you so much when you go into an experience. And so I love that tip, man. That is amazing. Thank you.
Ryan, thanks for having me on, bro. It's been so great talking with you, man.
Of course, man. And guys, when I think about the most beneficial tools available for those interested in plant medicines, I automatically think of the ones which Jeremy offers to gain self-awareness. For me, I truly believe the key to life is simply continuing to gain awareness throughout your life. Through awareness, one has the power to feel into what is working and what is not, and have the opportunity to continually keep honing in on what will help him or her live the most fun, fulfilling life possible. And if you listen to this episode and were inspired by Jeremy's story and his approach to self-awareness, then make sure you reach out to him and check out Empath X, because I truly believe that, as I said earlier, the most important and valuable aspect to life is continued gained awareness. Jeremy, thank you so much once again for hopping onto the show today. And until next time, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho, brother.